Okay. All right.
Is anyone else in the video?
I guess we're all human.
Our
guest
speaker. Thank you to Anna Siedenberg for coming today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And I guess I'll let you introduce yourself.
All right. Yeah, so my name is Anna Siedenberg. Really professionally go by Anna, like personally go by Rochelle, so either one. And I graduated from TI about 7 years ago now. It's kind of crazy, but it's been a while. And then I did my master's in occupational therapy at University of Illinois here. And I graduated about 6 years ago from there. So, yeah, I guess I've been, working about 6 years.
1 year.
No, and I guess I demanded really 8 years ago already. Yeah, because it's a 2-year program. And I work at Beth Austin Associates, which is a pediatric clinic in Skokie. And it's like primarily like a set of people, we can talk more about that, but like sensory integration based clinic. So, and I've been there, I was an intern there, and then I started working there, so I've been there in most of my career. So maybe I'll just start with kind of talking about OT a little bit and the process and what it's about, and then you guys can jump in when you have questions, and then I have some like show and tell here for the second part, talking more about the pediatric end of it. Yeah, I mean, because OTs are very hands-on, so that's kind of the best way to learn about it. So for those of you who don't know, occupational therapy, I think is it can be like a tricky thing to define. People are always kind of wondering, well, you're not a PT, you're not a speech, right? So like, what do you do? And it's a very broad field, and I would say the general definition of it is we're really helping people with their day-to-day occupations, which could be, it could be work, it could be play, it could be, daily living skills. There's so many different, it can be life skills. So there's so many different applications for so many different areas, which is what I think makes it a really awesome field. Also a little bit hard sometimes, you have to kind of find your place in it. But, there's so many different areas to work in, so it's going to look different, and different, kind of helping people with their day-to-day functioning is going to look different in different areas. So, for an adult who had a stroke, you're really going to be working on, you might be working on dressing, you might be working on feeding with them, you might be working on helping them get stronger so that they can do those daily skills. OTs tend to do a lot of adaptations. They're really good at kind of looking at things and figuring out how can we adapt things and change things to make the person successful. And a lot of task analysis, so really breaking down how do you do something, how can we make it easier, how can we build up people's skills so that they can do it. So with adults you're working a lot on that, but the really fun thing is you can also go broader and you can work on higher level skills like visual, perceptual skills, like problem solving skills, daily living skills. So, going to a mall with a senior who had a stroke and really helping them learn how to navigate the mall again, helping them learn how to how much money they need, how to, if they have limited mobility, how they can reach for things and get along, and what kind of, strategies you can use. Then it's going to look totally different, if you're working with pediatrics, for example, then you're going to be doing a lot more, depending on where the kid's at. You might be working with babies in early intervention. I work in a private clinic, so we're working with kids that are having difficulty for whatever reason, usually, in school or behaviorally, and we're really, really looking at, so what are the breakdowns, what skills are they missing, how can we help build it up, and we're using play because that's their main, the main way that they're going to be learning and the main area they're functioning in. So it's super broad. You might be working in a nursing home and you might be working on, again, kind of some of those more basic skills like strengthening, feeding, socialization. You might be working in a school, and then you might be working on educationally related skills, so helping them with whatever their occupation is to be a successful student in the school. So then you might be working on writing, you might be working on helping them navigate their classroom, you might be working on helping them learn strategies, accommodations for sensory processing issues. So it's just super, super broad, which I think is really fun. And what really attracted me to the field is you kind of are combining, I think, the best of a lot of different disciplines. So, you get a little bit of the, my mom is a physical therapist, so I always kind of watched her. She was in pediatrics and was interested in what she was doing, but that's very physically oriented, really, gross motor, really working on mobility and helping people get, around and get stronger. So OT, really looks at the body and pays attention to the body, but then there's also more of a psychological perspective, which is really nice. So you know, you really are kind of looking at how their social emotional functioning is, what kind of things they want to do, what motivates them. It's a really whole person field, and then there's a really huge creative aspect, so it's really nice for people that have kind of that creativity and they want to kind of channel it. So, you know, because you really have to think about how can you adapt the task, you know, to fit this kid. How can you get this kid engaged so that they'll want to work on this, and not, you know, I think as an OT you kind of bring to the table kind of looking at, again, that whole person. So, you know, everybody's kind of focused on, well, the PT's like, are they getting stronger? You know, the speech person is really working on their speech, and then you're kind of looking on, well, what are they going to need to succeed in this environment, and what are the skills they need? So it can be a really nice, really broad perspective. Yeah, so I really like it for that reason. And, you know, I'd say in terms of prerequisites that you need, they kind of reflect that. It's not as heavy in the sciences as, say, PT, and then speech has like their own specific ones. But you usually need anatomy and physiology. A lot of times you need like a biology or something like that, depending on the program. And then you need like more soft sciences, and like you need sociology or child development. You know, many times you need, usually abnormal psychology is something that you need to take, a little bit of statistics. That was like my one math that I like had to take, so couldn't avoid entirely, but.
When you get to graduate school, what do you, like, what are the subjects? Like,
So, yeah, so that's a really good question. So the subjects in graduate school are more OT based. So they'll do like, say they have a class called structure and function, which was a lot about like motor development and, you know, like the bones and the muscles and how that works together. But then you're really trying to apply it to OT. So they're looking at it from like an OT perspective of like, so then how would you help a person that had a hip replacement learn how to get dressed again? How would you, you know, help a person that had a stroke and can only use one arm? How would you help a kid, you know, that has cerebral palsy, to help, you know, their mom learn how to, you know, handle them, or bathe them or whatever. So you're kind of applying it really practically, you know, and then you have like a research methods class.
It's not like the scientific part of it, it's more like the practical part of it?
Yeah, it's not heavy, like I am not, like I don't love, like, you know, like I like sciences in moderation, but I don't love them. So it's a nice blend, I think, of, you need to have a little bit of, you know, background in science, but it's not too intensive on that. I found grad school was a lot of work. You know, it was really intense, really demanding. There was a lot of projects, and, you know, different programs are different, so just, you know, in terms of the programs in this area, there's UIC, which is, you know, west past downtown, and University of Illinois, and that's where I went, and it's pretty competitive to get in. And then there's Rush, which is also in that area. You know, and I would say the University of Illinois has a more research-based, like, kind of very model. So they're very heavy in research. They're heavy in theory. They're not as heavy on practical stuff, which can be a little frustrating, like when you get to your actual, we call field works, where you have to actually like know stuff and you don't. But what everyone really says is you learn everything, like when you like on the job, and like when you're doing your field works is probably the best learning. Rush is supposed to have a more practical, you know, like bend to it. So it just kind of depends on your style. And they're both around the same amount. UIC is about 2 years. Rush is a little more, and then Midwestern is in Downers Grove. And you know, I know girls that have gone there. You know, and that's, you know, maybe a little bit easier to get in, I would say. And, you know, it seems like a nice, warm program. I think it's a little bit longer than UIC as well. You know, and there's a few more that, like, are really far out and probably not, you know, like Governor State, which is, like, close to Indiana. And then, obviously, there's programs, like, on the East Coast. Like, my sister's in Turo now. She's going, I say sold her on OT. Yeah. She's going for OT. So she's in Turo, and they, you know, so they have their own, they have a 3-year program, and a lot of programs are 3 years, so I felt lucky that my program was 2 years, and I didn't need to do a thesis for mine. They have what they call an OTD now, which is a doctorate in OT, which is an extra year if you're really interested in either like teaching, you know, in a OT-based program. It's a really good thing to get, or you have, you know, more of a research interest. But, you know, it's good to kind of, I think, see how you like it first, and, you know, just do the basic if you don't have specific plans, and then you can kind of see where you want to go with your OT job, because it's such a broad field. There's so many different like avenues, and it could almost look like totally different jobs and different fields depending on where you're, you know, working. Like I have friends working in such different settings in Ammon, and it's just like so striking in terms of the contrast. You know, I think the challenge of, you know, just isn't specific to OT, but I think, you know, starting an OT program, I was the only frum girl. that year, so I think that's, just coming from like a firm environment and going, seminary TI, that kind of thing, it can be like, it was, and I didn't anticipate it would be that hard, and it's definitely nice that it's almost all female, so, guys have like reverse affirmative action and that they can like get in really easily, because they really want guys in the field, but we only had one guy in our class of 29. So that's nice that, you don't have like as many issues with that. But, there still is a lot, like the first day, there's a lot of projects you need to do, there's a lot of pairing up, there's a lot of group work, there's a lot of, and everybody kind of socializes together in terms of, organizing outings, going out to drink, so you kind of have to, I think, any graduate school program, be prepared for that. I think it's nice if you can go with a friend, because that really, that's what I like wish for my whole time. And either way, you need to kind of like make some buddies like quickly so that you have people to cover for you for Yom Tov and like take your notes and stuff. So, I think it's just like going and being prepared and like thinking about how you're going to handle different situations makes a big like difference when you start something like that, because I know it's just like a big shift for me. And then it usually works is there's level 1 internships and level 2 internships. So level 1s are just like, they could be up to a month or they could just be like a week, and they're more observation. You don't have as many demands on you. And you're just kind of getting to know different settings. And then level 2 field works are usually for 3 months. They're really intensive. You're really, hopefully transitioning to like a full caseload and kind of becoming like a therapist by the end. So, and you have a supervisor, you get reviewed, and then if you pass that and you pass your classes, then you have to take, boards for OT. So the AOTA is the certifying, American Occupational Therapy Association is the certifying agency. So you have to pass they have a big test that's kind of intimidating, and everyone like gets really stressed out about it, and you need to pass that. And then once you pass that, you also have to get your licensure for whatever state you're going to work in. So it always helps to kind of think ahead in terms of where, when you're graduating, where you think you're going to want to be working, so you can start working on applying for licensure. So every state has different requirements. Usually the school will kind of help you, and sometimes you can work temporarily till you get your licensure. But you need to pass that test to get your licensure. So they kind of work together. So that's kind of like the broad like overview of OT. I don't know if anyone has questions, and I could talk more about pediatrics and show you some hands-on stuff. No? Nothing?
Is it easy to transfer your license to other states?
I did that. I'm licensed in New York and Chicago, and it's just a lot of money, really. I think that's what they're more, and you need to, complete some paperwork, you need to show them some proof of, like, transcripts, that kind of thing. So I think it's just good to keep everything, like, all your, like, if you have once you get started, also you need to take continuing education classes, and every 2 or 3 years, you have to renew your licensure, and you have to renew your board certification. So you want to keep track of that and have that. It's not super complicated. It's just you need to do it in advance, because you can't just jump in and start working right away. And if you are planning on moving, then there's been issues with people that have moved and they don't have their licensure. Of course, it ends up taking longer because it's the state has to process it, and they're not all that quick. So you want to just be prepared if you're working.
Okay, yeah, I have a
Yeah.
question. So I'm doing observations now, and I noticed there's like a lot of behavioral stuff. Like, it seems like to me like
Interesting.
there's
Yeah.
like a lot, like the actual like things that they're doing are like structured for OT, but like there's so much of it that's just like when they're sitting across like, oh, well, how'd you ask, and like all this stuff, and like, are there classes on that, or that's just like the OT that I happen to be observing happen to be very like into like the behavioral stuff, and like she's working with like ODD kids right now, like really intense behavioral stuff.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a huge component of that, and that it's really interesting, because if you can look at OT's history, it really started in mental health hospitals, where OTs kind of went in and they used a lot of like, what they called like arts and crafts, really is what they called it. Like they would, do basket weaving and pottery and that kind of stuff and they found it really helped these patients that had like kind of nothing going for them, like engage and, become productive and feel functional again. So it really started with like that mental health population. So I think there's a big influence of like the emotional functioning, even though now that's not where most of OTs work. And I even had to do like, UIC used to make you do an internship in a mental health hospital, so I had to go to like Chicago Read, which is an outpatient, it's an inpatient, it's like one of the last like state hospitals nearby. Used to be like a huge campus, where like people lived for like years and years. And it was a really interesting experience. Like, they have like inmates there that are, they've been able to go to this mental health hospital because they're certified as mentally ill and they've had good behavior. So they might have been in for like really, serious crimes, which I didn't really want to know like what they were. It's kind of, creepy. But yeah, and it's really interesting to kind of see OT in that setting and kind of see how that probably influenced other settings. And when I work with kids, there is a huge, because we're looking at the whole child, there is a huge, and I think that's why they make you take a lot of psychology classes. There is a huge piece of you're really looking at their, and different places are going to have different approaches. For example, some places are more we call like behavioral, like ABA approaches, where they're really working on reinforcement and that kind of thing. And some places are more, we call it developmentally oriented, where they're kind of looking at social emotional development. So there's different approaches in that you kind of learn on the job. But usually they have at least one class, kind of like on use of self and like therapeutic use of self was like what our class was called. I don't know how much it really helps, like, but I think it becomes when you kind of learn all the theory and you learn all of the, just kind of background that's always there, like kind of that awareness of the whole person. And I think that ends up like kind of becoming more natural, and OTs kind of do that, not always, but a lot of times they'll do that more naturally, especially if they're more interested in that. And then you definitely get more training on the job. You get more training depending on what area you go into. My clinic uses a floor time. We use sensory, there's many different treatment models. We use sensory integration approach, and then we use a floor time model. So that's a model that really is specifically, used for kids with autism, but can also be used, with a lot of other kids, and it really is looking at kids' social emotional development. So you kind of have that framework, and then we work with psychologists and social workers and speech therapists. So it's very multidisciplinary, so you're kind of learning and borrowing from different people's, disciplines. And then you're also getting, supervision, and, usually I think something to really look for when you're starting out is mentorship, and really in any field, but really looking for a place that isn't gonna like just throw you in, because some people just start jobs, like say in early intervention, where there's no supervision, they're going house to house, and then they're not really growing, and they don't really know what they're doing. So that can be kind of a bad situation to get in, because things can get really complicated, with different, with cases. Some are really straightforward and some are not, and it's not all like kind of, the things you can learn in a textbook. You really need like good models, and, like I'll have weekly supervision with my supervisor where we kind of talk about challenging cases, and we problem solve, and we talk about new techniques. And then we have group meetings every week where, a lot of times people will present on different, areas and different, things to kind of think about. So I think that's like a huge piece. Is a really good question. And I'd really look out for that when you're starting to work in a supportive environment.
Because I'm trying to decide now if I should be getting a BA in psychology or health sciences.
Right.
Because you kind of do it either way.
Right.
So which one would you say is like more helpful?
I don't think it matters, honestly. I think I know like for UIC, they're really looking for well-rounded like candidates, so they want to just see like a range of experiences that you need to get whatever, you need to get your prerequisites, but then I would really do whatever is more interesting to you. What they really want to see, though, what I think really helps for admission programs is definitely observation. Most of them don't say you need observation, but they highly recommend it. Like UIC recommends 50 hours, Rush recommends like 20 plus hours. So you really want to try to get observations, and then if you can get I find like getting a job, even if it's just like a really part-time kind of, once a week kind of thing, in like a health-related field, can also be really like helpful to kind of help you stand out of the crowd. And again, I think for any like kind of, anytime you're applying to grad school, any of the health sciences. So like before, when I was in TI, one year I did, I worked as a rehab aide. I observed at, North Shore Hospital. So then, and they happened to have an opening for a rehab aide, so I worked there on weekends where you're just helping the OTs and PTs, with their harder cases, like if they need a second hand for transfers, to help people get in and out of bed and help people with things and organizing equipment. So it wasn't like anything exciting, and like it didn't make me love, OT at all, because it was, dry, but it really was good for, it was good for my resume, and it gave me some real life experience. I also just say like if you're really thinking about a field like OT, and especially if you're not sure like which therapy or what you want to do exactly, like I'd really go like do a lot of observation, because it can like look very, first of all, do observation in a few different settings, especially in a setting you think you want to work in, and then in other areas, because you really want to make sure you like it before you commit to it. It's a really big commitment, and there is a lot of overlap between therapies, so you want to kind of find the one that really fits your personality the best, because it will be just the easiest. And I didn't find school was like the most like exciting or amazing on it, just to be honest. Like, it's a lot of theory, it's a lot of work. It wasn't like I went to school every day being like, I love it, which like I wish I did. And a lot of people, would probably say the same thing, and I'm sure different programs are different. But so you want to really know like why you're going in, and like that you really like it, because otherwise you're gonna like, I remember like coming in like January and like at my first semester and like being like, I don't want to go back. Like, this is like, so hard and so not, so not productive, and I'm the only, from girl, and like, these classes are not like great. And like I kept on going because I was motivated and, interested in the field, and like I had a bigger concept of like, I'd done a lot of observations and I'd worked and kind of knew like what it was about. But I think if not, it's just hard to, you just want to get through it. Yeah, so I mean, I think those are some things to think about when you're committing. And if you can get regular observation at like one place, that's nice too, because then you get to, sometimes follow consistent kids, and you get a better idea than if you're just in and out. But also just observing, and there's so many different settings, like, going to see a nursing home, going to see like an inpatient hospital setting, going to see, a pediatric setting, shadowing in a school. Like, there's a lot of different opportunities to see. So, even just calling, you can even call up like the OT departments and see, what they need. Sometimes we'll have like volunteers call up, and if we need like extra hands for like groups or, whatever, like sometimes we'll run like special summer groups or that kind of thing, then it can be really nice also, way to, you kind of are like getting a little more hands-on experience. Those can all be also good for your resume. And they like to see like diverse experiences too. So, like if you've done stuff like when you were in Israel, or you volunteered somewhere, or you do other, you do other things, or you've had other jobs that they're always good to play up. You don't want to you want to think about, your essays are a big thing too when you're applying, again, like to any area, but, kind of thinking about like why you want to be an OT and not in a cliched way is like a good, I think it's like challenging when you're applying, and you want to kind of stand out, especially, state schools like UIC, they don't even interview you. So they're not, they're not really looking, they're really looking at your GREs. So that's another thing to kind of prepare for. And then they're looking at your grades, obviously, like your GPA, and they're looking at your experience and your essay. Like they never met me before, they accepted me, which is kind of like a scary thought, but it can work to or against you, depending. And then other schools have interviews, so, you also know yourself, like where, it's good to, I think, observe the schools as well. If you're really thinking seriously about OT, like they usually have open houses at the schools that you're thinking about, like, like they'll have like every other Friday or once a month or whatever, they'll do an open house. So you get a sense of like the school and the atmosphere and all of that. I think that's a big thing. I think if you're like planning on, if you're getting married or you're planning on having kids while you're in school, that's also thinking about programs that are more accommodating, because some people have had really bad experiences in certain programs, and some, have not, just in terms of, accommodating for kids, and, even just some programs are more friendly than others or have had more experience. So it's, it's good to kind of be discriminating about that stuff, and, really, look at the different options and see how they feel, because sometimes what they say and what they actually feel like are different things. So definitely, if you're like applying in Chicago, go, like tour Rush, tour UIC, tour Midwestern, at least to start, and kind of see. Or if you're going on the East Coast, it's good, good to kind of do those as well. And sometimes you'll get a sense when, if there is an interview, you'll get a sense when you at that point as well. I think those are the main bullet points. And I can talk a little. I don't know if anyone has any other questions about. Yeah.
Are you like trying to like start your own practice, or like is that like a goal? Or like...
It's for me. It's not right now, because I really I like working with other people personally. Like I like that if you ever have if you're ever stuck, or you have a really hard case, you always have other people around. And I like that there's also, it's multidisciplinary, so meaning there's like speech and like we talked about, like there's different disciplines. So a lot of times kids that come with that have some needs, it's not just one area. So I think it's nice to be able to feel like you're working with other people, and that you can refer them to other people if you need to. But a lot of people do like to eventually open up their own practice, and that can be great if that's kind of your style. And then I think it's good to have that business background, or to really get good business advice if you're going to do that kind of thing, because that's a whole I'd say like insurance is a huge thing also to think about. Insurance is a really big thing to think about anyway now with healthcare, because it's it really kind of limits people's options sometimes, depending on certain insurances will cover, even OT, like certain insurances will only cover for certain reasons. Like they try not to cover if kids are just have, we call it developmental delays, like there's no like specific, like they didn't like have a head injury, they didn't have a stroke, like there's no specific reason, they just were kind of born with certain, challenges, so they'll try not to cover that. They only want to cover if there's a medical episode. So they're getting stricter just with all the healthcare changes. So insurance is like a huge thing, which I wouldn't really want to have to deal with right now. But that's something to think about, if you're going to go in your own practice and you really want to brush up on that kind of stuff. I think OT hours are pretty flexible, which is nice. You can, depending on what setting, like you're in schools, obviously it's a nice, a lot of people's families really like the schools. Even though, my personal bias is to clinics just because it's more exciting. Like from my perspective, I like that there's more going on. It's less structured, it's more play-based, you're looking at bigger picture issues, but some people like the schools because then, it's more contained, it's more predictable, it's kind of, you can go from like 9 to 3 or whatever, and then you have summers off, you have legal holidays off. So it's also thinking about what setting works best for you. Like I work later hours because kids come later, so I'm working more till like 6:30 or 5:30, 6:30 depending. But I don't work Fridays, I just work 4 days, which is, and a lot of people do where I work, so that's nice. Hospitals are gonna be more demanding. But, and then the pay scale also ranges depending where you work, so it's, depending what you're thinking about. And I just looked up like average salary is about, I think it's about 60,000 is in the Midwest is the average salary right now. Between 60 and 70,000 is the average salary right now in the Midwest, and the average like overall salary is about 74,000, which is pretty good, in terms of if you look at other fields. And then, obviously not as good other fields. So, but it's, it's a really in-demand profession. So people are really, especially depending on what field, what area you're going into, people are really looking for you, which is like great. Hopefully that will continue. And then once you're working, it's always good to kind of build up, figure out what your specialty is, kind of take classes in that, really build up your, expertise. And then even if the market shifts, you kind of know that, you have like your specialty and your expertise. And so, you can keep on, working and being successful and kind of marketing yourself if you need to. That's a good question. Yeah.
Could you explain more about like sensory integration, like all those terms?
Yeah, like people throw that around and what that means. Yeah, sure. And then I can kind of show you, we can play around with some stuff maybe. So, or I could even pass that stuff around. So, sure. So, sensory integration is the clinic where I work is, there's a big like sensory integration model that we use together with like the floor time model, which is more for the overall like social emotional, functioning. That's what kind of gives us that, like how we know how to interact with kids and things. So I'll just kind of.
Floor time is like what?
So floor time is more, it's a like relationship based model where you're kind of, you always assume like the kid is in the relationship with someone else, like say the OT, and you're making sure that the relationship is there before you do anything. So instead of just kind of, and this is big in OT anyway, you don't want to kind of do things to the person. OT is all about kind of seeing the whole person and helping them, which I think is really, really meaningful, because a lot of times people are like, oh, like that kid, we need to work on like their strength, or and they're kind of just doing stuff to that kid, but the kid isn't connected, they're not engaged. And you kind of see that with autistic kids especially. You really want to make sure that they're connected to you, and you're not just, working on a kid who's checked out with their handwriting is not going to get them far at all. But if they're with you and they're connected and they can, build a relationship, then you can get a lot farther. And there's different, the floor time approach really looks at different levels of, like what you need to build on first. So first you need to make sure that they're regulated, which means they're calm, they're organized, they're not screaming, they're not shut down. And then you want to make sure they're engaged, so they're really connected to you, they're looking at you, they're with you. And then you start working on back and forth. So it's kind of a model across different disciplines. So, like our social workers use it, our speech therapists use it. So we're always kind of looking at, well, is the kid connected? Where are they at in terms of their social emotional development? And then we can work on our individual, what are their individual needs, for speech or OT or emotionally, and then we work on those. So it's kind of cool to have that framework. I think, it makes it a lot easier to work with some of the harder kids. Instead of, because you need a kind of, you really always want to, you're pulling from your discipline, but then you're also looking at the bigger picture. And then the sensory, and then there's a lot of different approaches I use, like within, my practice. I'm also using like biomechanical, which is more just like how do the muscles work, how do we make people stronger? I'm looking at motor control in terms of how do we develop motor coordination. But then a really huge thing that I'm working on is sensory integration. So sensory integration is really looking at how all the senses connect and then build ups to help people really be able to process and we call integrate, be able to pull together all the information that's in their world so that they can actually have, you know, engage in their world in like a successful way. We call like have adaptive responses. So that means, you know, they're you know, for example, they're standing in line and they're not standing too close to their kids, so they're not bumping other kids. They're not trying to like go to the corner because they're so scared of someone else bumping them. You know, they're not, you know, the kid isn't screaming because it's too loud and they can't handle it. You know, they're not trying to hide under their desk because it's too busy, and you know, they're not getting overwhelmed because there's too many words on their page. So they're, you know, that's one kind of example of a kid that, you know, isn't, you know, sensory integrated. So there's a lot of different pieces to sensory integration. It's a whole kind of specialty, and like I got a lot more training on that after. You can, you know, touch on some of those things in pediatrics, but depending on your program, you might not, you know, cover a lot of that till after. So, you know, really looking at the 5, you know, it's really interesting because when we talk to parents, you know, by parent meetings about evaluations, we're really looking at all the different senses. So there's like touch, there's vision, there's hearing, which most people kind of know about, and then we kind of are also, and there's oral motor, which is, you know, like, you know, feeding and that kind of thing, and how we sense things with our mouths. And then there's also, we use, an OT use a lot of vestibular, if you've heard of this, and proprioceptive senses. So I'll just like pass around some things and you can kind of figure out like which, you know, area you're kind of working on. But this is, so vestibular and proprioceptive are are the movement-based senses that are kind of helping kids know where their bodies are in space. So vestibular has to do with balance, it's located in your ear, your body awareness, and proprioceptive is being able to sense your body kind of if you close your eyes, and you know, so if you guys close your eyes and now lift up your left arm, you can kind of feel where your arm is in space even with your arm closed, and you can do that with your arm closed. And if I would lift up your other arm and then have you put your other arm in the same position, you would be able to do that because you would feel it. You know, kids with poor body awareness aren't always feeling that kind of thing. So, you know, kind of pass around some things. So, first of all, we want to make sure kids aren't getting, this is putty, there's treasures in there, so you can try to find them. So you want to make sure kids aren't getting overwhelmed with their, I'll show you, I also have this is like a checklist we use for kids with sensory integration issues, so you can kind of, parents will fill that out to give us more information. So you're kind of, first of all, looking at our kids really overwhelmed with their sensory environment, so they're really overwhelmed. Can they not tolerate loud noises? Can they not tolerate bright sounds? Can they not tolerate fast movement? Because then they're not even going to be able to listen in class. And this one is for babies, if anyone's interested in babies. Is that where you? Okay. Yeah, of course. And then so you're looking at modulation, and then discrimination is like are they accurately feeling things? So can they like find those coins in there with their hands? Is their touch sense well developed enough? You know, is their movement and body awareness sense well developed enough that they know where they are in space, they know where their body is in space, they know where their arms and their legs are, and they're not going to bump into that other kid. So is their auditory well developed enough that they can hear the different, and this also overlaps with speech, but that they can overhear the different sounds when they're reading. You know, not just are they getting overwhelmed, but then how well are they actually processing the information? And we also look a lot at motor planning, so can they pull together all their senses to be able to organize around motor demands? And you know, can they go in a new swing without freaking out? You know, can they figure out how to get on playground equipment? You know, the kid kind of sitting in the corner that doesn't know how to use their body probably has motor planning issues. You know, they're not participating